Hello, crime fighters. Today was a very interesting InTouch, so you'll want to tune into this. Today, Officer Don and Ray the DA discussed the 10 most violent cities in America. And then they also discussed the fact that there is no truth in sentencing in Kentucky anymore. Thanks for listening, crime fighters. Join us next week. This is InTouch.
Up kids, all of that kind of stuff.
All the
Getting
things,
all of
the
these
things
diseases.
that go on now, stealing to get drug money.
You're right.
You and I have prosecuted a lot of violent crimes.
Mm-hmm.
It's safe to say that in most violent crimes you see alcohol. That's probably a safe assessment. Drugs will be next. Relationships would be next. That is a cause of violent crimes, homicides. And then you're going to put money, robbery, things like that. But it's pretty much in that order if you break it down. So if that's the case, even the argument for alcohol, I drink, but the reality of it is that
I don't.
There's some There's some side effects to alcohol, and why do you want to add the marijuana into the mix and make it legal now too? The argument doesn't make any sense. Yeah, alcohol is already legal, and you're right. You're not going to make it illegal. Whatever, that's done. You're going to just keep adding things that with their various side. It just blows my mind. And then you've got with the marijuana issue, they've had this pop up in a couple of the states that have legalized it. By the way, it's still supposed to be against federal law to do marijuana. But anyway, a couple of states have legalized it. Who regulates it? Because some of this stuff is tainted now. Does the FDA? So the FDA will regulate the aspirin that you're taking, but they're not regulating the marijuana. They're just letting people just deal in this marijuana, and nobody's regulating it. And now the federal government has got another dilemma. They think it's a dilemma. The banks, they have regulations that say you're not allowed to deal with drug dealers, and the laws are. So they're trying to figure out a way to tell the banks, okay, it's okay, you can deal with these drug dealers.
Only these drug dealers.
But it's still illegal. Federal. It has to be an executive order. There's still laws. The law of the land says that banks can't deal with drug dealers. They'll be prosecuted.
Well,
crazy.
Let me tell you the side effect of just what you're talking about. Most of these pot sellers in Colorado and in Washington, who are doing it legally, are dealing in cash. That's what they're doing. They're dealing in cash. Now here's their problem, because they're dealing with a lot of cash. And where do the thieves and the robbers and the hoodlums go to get money? Where the money is. And so now what these people are doing is they're terrified because people are breaking in, stealing not only money, but they're stealing their product. I mean, everybody thought this in Colorado and Washington thought, boy, this is going to be just great.
Who thought that?
Well, I mean, all those potheads out there, which probably the legislature.
Wow. There are just so many aspects to it, and they've
unintended consequences of what you're talking
but just irresponsible consequences, because like we said, it's still illegal at a federal level. They're just choosing not to prosecute. It's really not fair. I mean, why would you turn a blind eye to the marijuana, but you still go after the people that are dealing in cocaine? And I don't get it. Just because the state said it's legal, it's not. It's against federal law. The state generally can't pass laws that are in conflict with the federal, right? I mean, that's the general rule of thumb is that you can't pass a law that is going to be in direct conflict with.
Well, here's the problem. Your president has decided that they're not, and this guy that's trying to act like an attorney general, Eric Holder, who is, by the way, a disgrace. Or they're not enforcing the federal marijuana laws. They have chosen yet again not just to ignore the law. They took an oath, Officer Don, to enforce the laws of the United States and the Constitution, and they're making a choice about what they're going to enforce and what they're not going to enforce, and it's just That's where it is.
Yeah, well, it's a rule of law thing. Take the politics out of it. The reality of it is, the way that our government's set up is the laws are passed by the legislative branch. Congress passed laws, and the executive branch is part of enforcing those. I don't understand how they can just change them without going through Congress. It doesn't make any sense. But I'm trying to comprehend how that's working. It apparently is working. But I think this thing in Denver, in order for it to work, if there's any chance of it working, this whole marijuana thing, they're going to have to make a lot of changes to the way things are done. And are they willing to stomach those changes? I mean, who knows? I mean,
Well, the
just either do it or don't, you know?
well, John Denver had it right when he sang that song Rocky Mountain.
John Denver would probably approve, I would guess.
Oh, no question,
I
as
think
he
he
went
would.
down in his airplane.
Yes, he was allegedly intoxicated when he crashed his airplane. Did you know
Right.
that?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Have been drinking?
Well, I got another one. The most violent, dangerous cities in America, and they're ranked top 10. And they only consider cities that are 200,000 population or above.
Okay.
And that lets Flint, Michigan out. And that would include Lexington. You know, we're more than 200,000. Now, the 10th most violent city is Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's awful cold up there.
It is.
Yeah. So the crime must be in the summertime. Yeah.
It's freezing.
What next is Atlanta. Now has become a pretty violent city. Next is Cleveland. Then followed by Baltimore. You know, Baltimore for the longest time there are two prosecutors in Baltimore, the Baltimore City prosecutor and Baltimore County prosecutor. In the Baltimore City prosecutor's office, they didn't have any luck. They were like Detroit. The police would solve 10% of their homicides, and then they would get almost no convictions even in that 10%. Whereas Baltimore County was almost no homicides. So if I were going to work up there, I'd go for the county myself. And anyway, that's that. Then you got Birmingham, Alabama, Stockton, California. What cities are we missing that you would think have to?
Oh, Chicago, I would guess, would be there.
Chicago is not in it.
It's not there. I don't think New York would. Giuliani cleaned most of that up. You know, I would put Chicago. I'm surprised Chicago's not there.
Memphis is next. Then comes St. Louis. You know, on the way to St. Louis. Have you ever been driven to St. Louis? You go through East St. Louis, which is in Illinois.
Yeah.
And I always heard that if you have a flat tire in East St. Louis, you just go ahead and drive on it until you get over to St. Louis.
It's very violent.
Oakland, California, and then up top, I'm surprised you didn't pick this, Detroit. Detroit, rape is up 46%. Think about that.
And the clearance rate in the rapes and homicide, how many of them are resolved?
Low. Yeah, 10%. And then robberies are up, 8 to 10% in Detroit. So, you know, that doesn't help them much. So, that's that. Well, we got some death penalty news. And this was reported in the Courier-Journal. There's a guy named Michael Dale Sinclair that's on death row in Kentucky. He's on death row for kidnapping and murdering a distillery worker in 1991. He was sentenced to death. Now, he appealed his conviction. He says that the jury shouldn't have known about the specifics of his prior criminal record. For example, or even the cheerleaders at the Lexington Herald Leader, in an article by John Cheeves, said it ain't getting the results that they promised.
But you know, I had I had a friend of mine send me that article, but his point was, the feeling is that the judges aren't following the letter of the House bill, so they're still keeping people in jail when they shouldn't be, and that's why it's not working. Was that what the article said? I did not read that.
Well, here it is. The blame game has started now. You know, once that thing comes out, that everybody is just, oh my God, we got to defend what we've done. And the main author of this thing is a Representative John Tilley from Hopkinsville. And he blames judges and prosecutors because he says in some parts of the state, the judges and prosecutors just aren't following the law. And my response to him is, hey, John, the public is very, very concerned about their own safety and security. And judges and prosecutors deal with the public every day on the front lines. They know what the public wants. The public wants people who commit crimes to be punished. And that means go to prison. And that's what they're doing. Now, in big cities like Lexington and like Louisville, where nobody knows who the judges are, nobody does. They can probate people and leave them out, and nobody knows.
Yeah.
But you go to a place where there's one circuit judge doing this kind of thing, and they release 60% of the people on probation, guess what? That judge is out of there. Because they know what the public wants. Then he says that we need to release more inmates or don't send more. And my response to that is, under that wacky theory, we could save the most money if we didn't send anybody to prison. You know, and that must be where he's going with that thing. And then the Justice Secretary, Michael Brown, says, you know, we have a fair number of repeat customers. He used that term. And my response to Michael Brown is, no kidding.
Yeah.
They're called repeat felony offenders. You see, we know two things about repeat felony offenders, Officer Don. Number one is when they're on the street, they commit crime after crime. And when they're in custody in jail or prison, guess what? They don't. So,
and what percentage of the population in general commits 80% of the crime?
oh, about 5%. Those are the
5%.
repeat offenders. Then you got Bob Lawson, the guy who generated this whole thing, said the same thing. They didn't go far enough in releasing people, and I've said it before, and I've told him, because he's a friend of mine, we just disagree on this. I said, Bob, here's the problem. You live in a safe suburban neighborhood that is not a high crime neighborhood. And guess what? Easy for you to say, let them out. Because you don't have to suffer the consequences of these characters coming back to your neighborhood committing more and more and more crime.
Well, it's interesting that they can do this once. They can pass the buck and say, well, it's because you're not letting enough people out. That defies common sense. That crime's going to go down if you release the people in prison. Well, they said they're going to save $422 million, and so far they haven't saved anything. No, well, because those same people, all you're doing is giving them more time before they have to go back to jail. Because at some point you got to lock them up, because they're not going to quit committing crimes. That's the point. So, well, it's fun. We'll see what happens. We'll keep an eye on it. Who you got here with you today?
Elizabeth Feldposh. Elizabeth is an intern with our office. She's a student at Georgetown College. And Elizabeth, what have you been doing since you've been working at our office?
Well, I've only been here a few weeks, but during those weeks I've been able to go to a few murder trials, which have been really interesting, and pre-trials where we're meeting like one-on-one with the defendant. So it's been really interesting, and I've been a lot more hands-on than I thought I ever would be able to.
Okay. So you're into what do you eventually want to do?
Well, I'm a double major in psychology and communication right now, and I'm hoping to go to law school after I graduate next year.
That's because communication and what's the other one?
Psychology.
Yeah. That doesn't say J-O-B at the end. Yeah, right? Am I right on that?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Okay, well tell me, so before you came to do this internship? What did you think you were walking into?
I just thought I'd be doing a lot of office work and maybe just like observing like some things that the prosecutors are doing, not actually thinking I would get to go to court with them and like sit with the defendants and watch them do that type of thing. I thought I'd be more just like in the office doing that type of thing.
Yeah, so if you were selling this internship, what are you going to tell them out there?
I would say for everyone to do it because it's the most interesting internship that I've ever been a part of, and I know I go back to school and I tell all my friends about it and they're all jealous, and I know I have friends that intern at other companies and they're like, oh, can we quit and come to work with you, because they love everything I've told them I've been doing.
And I think it's safe to say felons need not apply for an internship in your office.
No. But, you know, I was asked one time when I was in Washington talking about our reentry program, and some character in the back of the room stood up and said, well, Mr. Larson, how many ex-felons are employed in your office? And I said, 0. And that will be the way it is as long as I'm in office. And so I'm just harsh, I guess.
Well, it makes no sense. You're prosecuting them. Why wouldn't you have stuff in the office? We'll see you next week on InTouch. All right.